Hey guys, it's me. My unit was about change over time, a study of Arkansas regions, and I created it, Karen Chilton. So let's get into it. My unit was in a third grade classroom, and there's not one-to-one technology, which was a big deal in my unit. Technology was actually really hard to access, and there are 20 students in my classroom. So, the enduring understandings that I really wanted my students to get were that individuals, events, and ideas have changed regions over time, and these changes impact our state in a variety of ways to create a better place for Arkansans. And then the other one was changes over time occur to meet specific needs of people in communities. So that's what I was really trying to get them to understand. And then the essential questions that helped them build up to that were what challenges have people faced over time and how have they overcome those challenges? Why do regions experience change? How have people collaborated to influence change in an area? How can studying evidence from the past help us prevent future problems and make decisions that will affect the future? What can we learn from the past? How has our community changed over time, and how have we changed over time? So one thing that I really wanted to focus on was our place in the environment and how we really do have an impact on what happens in the future. So the subjects that this unit covered was initially social studies, but after seeing responses to the unit, we incorporated math and writing into it in the second week. So the standards that went with it were the Arkansas History Standard that students compare specific regions of Arkansas in the past with those regions today, noting changes over time, hence the entire unit. In math, we solved two-step word problems using the 4 operations. And then in writing, we wrote opinion pieces on topics or text supported with reasons. And then we wrote narratives to develop real or imagined experiences or events using effective technique, descriptive details, and clear sequenced events. So those were the things that were continued in the second week. The main goal of the unit that I really truly wanted students to understand was that we as people create change to better ourselves and those around us. We also create change to make our lives easier and our environment more appealing. So we have an impact on the world in the future. So day 1, I gave a presentation over the Ozarks, and we watched a couple of videos about the region. We attempted to read an article that I had written, but we didn't get finished. I ran out of time, and I felt overwhelmed because I felt like there was so much content to cover, and I would not have enough time to do it in 2 weeks, even if I spent all day talking about the topic for 2 weeks. So in day 2, we continued to learn about the Ozarks. So on this day, I decided to do a lecture format to try to get through more content quicker. It was horrible, and I didn't like it, and the kids didn't like it, and I'm not sure what they took away from that experience, but I learned that it was not good for me. And then on day 3, in regard to unit of change, my lessons and plans changed almost daily as I learned about how to teach these kids about this. So on day 3, we began an interactive map. I created a map of Arkansas and outlined the regions, and then we, as we talked about the different regions, the images I had in my presentation, students added those to the map so that they could have a visual to go with it, and they would understand that those pictures go with that region. So those people, those places, and those events that happened there were added to our map. So days 4 through 6, we continued to use the map, and students really took off with it. They really loved it. My engagement was significantly higher with all of my students, the low ones, the high ones, the students who had ADHD. Even my kid, Derek, who didn't speak any English, was engaged. He was listening, waiting for his turn to add a picture to our map. So students ended up asking questions about the regions that I didn't have an answer to, and they had sticky notes in their desks that they wrote these down on. Then they went home that night, researched their question, and then presented the answer the next day to the class. So they really took ownership over understanding and knowing about these regions of Arkansas, and it was really cool to see that. So then in day 7, we had finished talking about all the regions of Arkansas, and the students and I worked together to create a rubric. And the main reason that I wanted students to create their own rubric was to take ownership in their learning and to be responsible for it and to have pride in their work, and build up that confidence like, hey, I can do this. So we worked together to create that rubric, and I had an outline of what I wanted, and we talked about what was important and what wasn't, and what was the criteria for a 4, 3, 2, and 1. So days 8 to 9.5 were right in the middle, where we had the teacher career seminar. So I had to create lesson plans, which is why I have 9.5 days. So they did work days and then presentations. So half of the class presented, and some students who were supposed to go weren't ready. So they were told that they could take it home and come back the next day, because I had some students who were supposed to present on Friday who were ready already. So as a class, as students were presenting, we assessed them on each criteria based on the rubric, and then then the student who presented reflected on their experience. And I had students who argued with me about the scores, and it was really fun to see them provide evidence for the scores and to go back and forth with each other about why a student should or should not get a score. So that was really cool to see. And then on day 10, our last day, the students continued their presentations, and as a class we continued assessing them, and then they all reflected on their experience. So I think for me, the biggest struggle was being flexible with testing. In my first week, when I was trying to teach the content before we got into our projects, we had 4 to 6 days of testing because of time changes and all of this craziness that happened with testing. And I think it had a very negative impact on my unit overall, because there were some days that we had 2 days of social studies in one day, and then there were other days that we didn't have social studies at all. And I think that with that, students were confused about some of the information and what region that information went with. Some other struggles that I had was running out of time in general, making sure that all of the students were engaged, and allowing students to explore the unit on their own. And then, of course, technology, which goes with them exploring the unit on their own. There's not a whole lot of books and literature about Arkansas regions. So some things that I learned as a teacher, I learned that in my own classroom, things would be different because I wouldn't be leaving. So we ran out of time, and I had to really rush the students on their final projects, and it did not end up well. But in my own classroom, I wouldn't be leaving, so I would just continue going on that. We would have had more time to work on them, and then the presentations would have been better. I also learned that being flexible is key. However, I do prefer more consistency, and in my own classroom, I would have worked around testing differently. So I would have kept the same schedule, and we just wouldn't have done the subjects that testing interfered with. And I finally also learned how powerful student-created assessments can be when engaging students in a project like this. So that was my unit. It was Change Over Time, a study of Arkansas regions. So I've got a great handout for you guys with all the information and some pictures of my students working on their projects, presenting, and then a picture of their research questions. So we had a lot of fun, and learning definitely occurred. Thanks.